This is the video tutorial for the installation of the BallistiShield paneling. Paneling turns a regular car door into a duck and cover. This is extremely important for law enforcement. This particular system is rated around a 3A NIJ standard, in which case it will stop 12 gauge shotgun up to about, well, we've tested it up to 1600 feet per second slug at point blank range. For the 3A NIJ, that's up to 1350 to 1400 feet per second. So that's what we have it at. So 12 gauge shotgun slug, buckshot, 9mm, 45 ACP, 44 Magnum. And if it'll stop a 12 gauge shotgun slug at point blank range, it's going to stop the 500 AE. Now before we get started, I'll show you some of the tools that you're going to need to effect the installation of these paneling. First thing you're going to want actually is a hammer and a flat bar. That's for getting the molding off the front and the door paneling off the back. It's just to reach down there and just pop it loose. I also recommend getting one of these little guys. This is to pop those little, they're called release receiver plugs. They're the plastic plugs that poke into the door holes that hold the molding on. This gets behind them and pops them out. You can also use the flat bar. I've used the tin snips because I've got a nice flat head on there and I can just pop them out nice and easy. Something else you're going to want is a putty knife, because we're going to be removing on the crash bars that go about like this and about like this. They have foam between the crash bar and the skin of the door to help strengthen it and reduce any rattling. But we got to get some of the excess of that out of there so we can take advantage of the crash bars. That's what we set the paneling into. Also a long neck screwdriver, preferably a flathead. It doesn't hurt to have a long neck Phillips as well. Measuring tape, flashlight, very important. A Sharpie, because we'll be making some marks on the inside of the door to line things up. You're going to need a socket wrench, and in this case 10mm and a 7mm. I think the 7mm is also a 9/32 socket. We'll provide a box. This is for measuring and for drawing some lines that are very crucial. You're also going to want the all-important duct tape. We'll be taping some things into place until the glue can set, and we'll need the duct tape to hold some panelings in place as we're moving other things around. Very important. You're going to want to have a gluing system. I prefer the insulation foam. This stuff is very sticky and it expands. So if there's a void in there, it'll expand until it meets up against the paneling and against the door. And then when it cures, you got a nice solid glue system that's holding everything in place. And it also will eliminate any rattles. Even though this stuff is jammed in there quite tight, there's always a chance for rattles. So if you have an industrial glue to keep the stuff in, or this foam, that takes care of all that. You're also going to need a drill. And the drill bits that you're going to be using is a 3/8 inch drill bit. That's for the holes down here. And for the holes up where the side view mirror is, so you can put your bolts through once you get the material up in there. And also an 1/8 inch drill bit. That's because we're going to actually be drilling into the crash bars and securing the paneling in place with some wood screws or some metal screws. Also a nice thing to have is some plastic bags or some newspaper. We're going to be putting those down the bottom here at the first part of the installation, so when we're taking things out, we're not dropping things all the way down in here where we can't get to. So we'll just plug it up with a bag or newspaper, so if something does fall, you can reach down and pick it right up. So let's get started. The first thing we have to do is remove this door molding on the outside door. So you may want to invest a little time in Googling how to remove the door molding from a Ford Interceptor. I just kind of went at it and just did it. I took my flat bar, I started back here. I did not start up here because I was afraid I was going to scratch the paint. So I started here where it would not affect any of the cosmetics of the door. And I just started popping the door molding out until I could reach in with my little extruder tool and I get behind those release retainer plugs, those plastic plugs, and I could pop them out. Now this whole thing will come off and you can see where the plugs are in. Now if they stay in the door, again this would be the perfect tool for it. You want to gently rock it back and forth until they pop out. You're probably going to be stretching the little flanges on these plugs. That's okay. There you can see the flanges that come down as a V. Because when we're all done with these, we'll be drilling out these holes. There'll be material back here now. That's why you need that 3/8 inch drill bit. We'll be re-drilling these. These flanges are not going to do much good anyway. What we're going to do is we're going to pop a little industrial adhesive in there, glue or the foam. You just pop some in there, and then we'll take the entire door molding, all put back together, and pop it in, and that glue or the foam will hold that in place quite effectively. This red tape line, that's the coverage that the BallistiShield system is going to provide. The reason we can't get it up here is because you got a lot of door mechanism right behind the skin here. There's no way we can get anything up against the skin or in there because there's just too much hardware back here. It's impossible. Right here, there's a strengthening bar system up against the skin, and again, we cannot get material up there because that is in the way. So we get as much as we can. Anything like here is going to be 4 layers of the BallistiShield. Down here, because of the limited volume we have between the outer skin and the inner skin of the door, we can only get 2 panels all the way to the bottom, 3 to about right here. So this has a little bit less of the paneling, but we've tested it out on the range. This stopped the 9mm 44 ACP, stopped the 44 Magnum. It did not stop the shotgun slug. Because of this is just the lip hanging over. This is the inside of the door is right here. It stops right here. So we got everything butted up as far to the front of the door as possible. Now when you open the door, this is gonna fold in behind the fender of the car. So if you're looking down the fender and you're behind the door, you got coverage. If anything outside that fender, that's where you want the coverage. This part actually tucks in when you open the door and it V's into the car. So that's okay, but see if I can put my hand back there, that's where the skin of the car comes out anyway. The guts of the car is right here. This is where you're going to be standing if you're engaging an active shooter. So this is where we focus on getting the majority of the material. We've got material as far back as we can. Unlikely you're going to be standing this far back. See, this covers my entire body right here, down to this level, which is about 12 to 15 inches off the ground. So we're trying to provide maximum coverage with what we have to work with. Now what sets us apart from other systems that are out on the market, other than the price being significantly lower, is what they have out on the market right now only covers like this. Because they tie into this crash bar that goes down, they got a bolt system with 2 bolts. Material is only about this much. So all this extra stuff is open for penetration. This system is cost effective and it works. And I'll throw up a still of one of the doors we took out to the range. We put close to 150 rounds into it, starting from the 9mm, went up to 44 ACP, 44 Magnum, and then the 12 gauge shotgun all at about 3 yards. And the 12 gauge shotgun stops some of the 1610 feet per second. So we found its limitation and we designed accordingly. So we put a couple extra pieces in there and took it out again, and we consistently stopped the 1560 feet per second. So it's right up to about the 1600 feet per second velocity of a 12 gauge shotgun at point blank range, and it stopped it. Again, to make a 3A NIJ level ballistic standard, it only has to reach 13 to 1400 feet per second. We're up to almost 1600, and we've got video showing that it stopped the 1560 and the 1610. Though a couple of the 1610s got through, namely one down here, and I think we had one here and one here for some strange reason. But it stopped the 1560, so that's quite significant. So now that we have the bottom door molding off, I'll turn the door around and we'll start disassembling some of the pieces that have to come out in order to get the paneling in. I recommend taking the window out. It only takes a few minutes. The molding on both sides up on top, that takes a few seconds. Then you can start dropping in paneling. So once the front molding is off, we can now move to the door paneling. And the first thing we want to do is remove the side view mirror. You'll have to take this piece off. That just pops right out. We'll have two 10mm bolt heads right here. Take those out, the whole unit will come off. There's an electrical, for most cars, we'll have an electrical plug that'll unplug as well. And then when you have the side view mirror removed, we can start with the door paneling. To remove the door paneling, we have to go here, here, and down here to get to some bolts and some screws. There's a little plat right there. I usually use a needle or a long nail or something skinny with a poke on it. I come in here and then pop out this direction. Comes out real easy. And I get one in here. I use a flashlight to line my tool up, and I can get in there and pop it out. Usually works best on the bottom. Go in from the bottom and pop up. Put those guys in a safe location so you don't lose them. Then on the bottom, there's two screws, either Phillips head or a 7mm socket, which is about a 9/32 of an inch socket. Something like that. That'll take those out. Got a 10mm bolt head there and two 10mm bolt heads there holding it in. Once that's done, you can take like a flat bar or a crowbar with a flat head on it and just loosen things up around here, and then go in with that red handled plastic release receptacle post remover, and you just go in and straddle that plastic post and pop each one of them out separately, and that should come off. I count about 8 of those plastic posts that hold the door panel into the back skin here. You're going to want to remove that from the car just to make things easier. And here I've got part of it removed already, but this is for like the window. I would leave that plugged in and actually remove the window switch. The way you do that, it's got 2 little press-ins on each side. You press that in, that whole thing will pop out. You'll also have the lock mechanism coming up through here. You're going to have to pop that through. There are some plugs, electrical plugs, right here that plug into the door lock, and a small speaker up here. Unplug those as well. The whole thing should come off. Now obviously we have this removed from the car. The whole system's designed to leave it on the car. That way now you can take your window switch, plug it back in, and you can raise the window up and down using this. I have to resort to separate battery and some probe wires, and I'll bring the window up and down here shortly. Next thing we want to do is remove the speaker. Again, that's a 7mm bolt head. There's a half dozen around there. And we'll take the speaker out so we have access to the inside of the door. And you will have to remove that part as well. So there I have access through the speaker area. This screen needs to come off. Put all these items in a safe place so you don't lose them. And now I'm going to remove this molding on the inside of the door. This one just pops out because it's just clipped right on this ridge here, on this lip. And on the front side of the door, this little hex screw right here. I've got it loose right now, but it takes a hex head, and then this piece will just pop right off. And so I don't lose the screw, I'll actually put it back in the molding piece here. Give it a couple turns, and put it aside in a safe place. Now I recommend taking the window out just so we have better accessibility into the interior of the door when we start dropping those panels in. The first thing you want to do, grab some newspaper or just a bag and put it down on the bottom of the door, because you're going to be dropping bolts and you're going to be dropping small pieces of paneling, and if it falls down way down to the bottom here, and you only got about a ½ inch of space in there, it's going to be hard to get that bolt or nut or piece of paneling out of there. So just drop some newspaper in or a bag, and then we can start removing items. So I'm going to drop this window about halfway down so I got a good approach to the cradle that holds the window in place. There's two cradles. There'll be one right about here and one about here. And in that you have a 1-inch bolt with a 10mm socket. So there's the bolt right there. I'm going to use a 10mm ratchet. I can loosen the bolt with the ratchet, and then the rest will come out just twisting it with my finger and thumb. There it is right there. It's about 1 inch long. Now this hole right here, if you can line up a bolt for the window, you can go straight in with your ratchet. That's what that hole is there for in the first place. There's your second bolt. Now I'll lift right out, but before I want to do that, I'm going to actually loosen this window tracking that's right here. And I'm going to take that out as well, because towards the end of the install, I'm going to be putting some items up in this area. And if that's cleared out, I got much easier access. You don't have to take the window out, but since I'm there, okay, now this window lifts up just like that. I'm going to take the bolts and just put them in there. Screw them into the cradle so I don't lose the bolts. And we'll be shimming these later once we put the window back in. So we got plenty of room when this thing goes up and down and these bolts don't catch on any of the paneling. So I'm going to put this in a safe place. Now I can reach up and grab that window tracking, pull it down. That's what that looks like. It goes in like this. to put the bolt where it needs to go so I don't lose it. So the first thing we want to do once we remove the window is we're going to focus on these two crash bars, one going horizontal, one a little bit at an angle in a diagonal fashion. And what we're going to do is we're going to go along the upper and lower lip, and we're going to clean out the extra goo that has foamed out at the factory. They put spots of glue every so often to glue the crash bar to the outer skin, and also acts as a dampener. But it likes to foam out and these pieces come up. They kind of look like that. And they'll be right like that. And that's going to get in the way of us utilizing these crash bars. We're going to be tucking our panels in behind these lips, both in the upper and the lower section of these lips that protrude out from the crash bar. So a couple of tools you can use for that is like a cutting knife. You can go down in there, they'll just pop right out. Don't remove the entire thing, just the stuff that's behind the lip. The stuff that's behind the flat of the crash bar you want to leave there, because that again acts as a dampener, reducing any type of rattles they have in the car. And we're going to be putting some foam and some glue in there later. But just go in like that, you can flip them out, take a long neck screwdriver in, pop them out. There's probably about 4 to 5 to 6 on each crash bar. And on the lower crash bar, you got a big hole here all the way towards the inner part of the door with a piece protruding out. Just trim that off. That way we can get in, drop these panels behind it. Let me show you how that works. Here's a piece. They're going to fit just go from the bottom. They'll slide up to there. We want a tight fit so there's no air gaps, no empty area where a bullet can come through if you ever find yourself in a gunfight. These are pretty much all the ones I found. There's about a dozen to 15 pieces. Probably also the ones that I missed. That's another reason you want to have that bag or newspaper down in the bottom here, because this stuff will drop down if you don't get a good grip on it. It slips out of your fingers, it gets down there. Now you got something wadded up down in the bottom of the car door there. And we want that clear, and so we can drop our panels all the way down to the bottom of the door. But if this stuff gets in there, well, that's going to cause problems. So now we can start dropping panel pieces inside the door, either from the large openings or from the top. And the main reason I'm wearing gloves is once they're in there, I'm going to be applying either a glue or a foam to help hold these things in place. And once they're in place and this foam or glue cures, it'll keep any paneling pieces from rattling. No, they probably wouldn't rattle in the first place because these things are set in pretty hard. The first two pieces you want to be looking for is these two long strips. They're going to go inside these channeled pieces of steel going across the door. You got one here and one here. Those are crash bars. And we're going to take advantage of those because they lip out. They'll lip up and lip down, and we'll use those lips to tuck our paneling in behind to hold them in place. What I recommend is popping this little grommet out here, and then you can actually go right on the inside and kind of thread that long piece in down there. Before you put it in though, I would grab your foam can or your glue and put it on the inside on the flat bar area of the crash bar. The foam works great because it'll foam out and it'll make contact on everything it foams into. So once I've got that in there, I'll place that in that crash bar. Then I'll use a little bit of duct tape and I'll just put that across to hold it in place so it doesn't fall out when I put other pieces in later on in the install. So that's the first piece. Let's go to the second piece now. Again, little strip of foam right there, or construction adhesive like liquid nail or Loctite. This one I can either come through here, or again I can bring it in through this little opening here where the wire harness comes through. Now that I got my foam in there, I'll put it in place and I'll slide it far to the right. You want everything going towards the front of the car door, because this is where you're going to be standing if you ever encounter an active shooter and you're using this door as a duck and cover. You're not going to be standing over here. You're going to be standing right here where the car door butts up and V's into the car itself. And then I can put a little bit of piece of tape there, just keep it in place. Because I'm going to be bumping things around and I don't want this stuff moving once I have it in there. So I'll take a close-up picture of this so you can kind of see how it's setting in. Now before we get any farther into this, we want to make a couple of markings here that line up with this crash bar, and especially the lip of this crash bar. Because once we get all the paneling in there, I'm actually going to drill right into this, and I'm going to drill into these lips, put in a couple of sheet metal screws. That's going to pull everything together and hold it in place. So not only will I have metal screws holding this in place, it's also going to be pretty much tightly fit, just because how these panels are jigsawed into place. And of course you got your foam helping with you at the same time. That way these things will stay in place no matter how many times they're hit with ammunition. You don't want them popping out, falling down, and then the next bullet coming through. This will hold in place all the sheeting that we put in there. We've taken this out to the range, we've tested it, we've hit it with 150 rounds of munitions, starting with the 9mm, 45 ACP, 44 Magnum, and the 12 gauge shotgun slug, all at point blank range. Everything held in place. It didn't fall down, it stayed right where it's supposed to stay, so it could receive the next round. Now the way we're going to mark this is we're going to take that little box I put in there. This actually is the perfect size. And take your Sharpie and then line up the edges of the box to the edges of the crash bar. Make sure everything's parallel. One, two, three, 4 marks. These are parallel with the crash bar. So once I get all my paneling in there, I can transfer that over and I know right exactly where to drill. Now we can start dropping the larger pieces in place. The first piece, they'll have a big number 1 on the front. And it actually doesn't have to go in, but I'm trying to maximize coverage and especially have everything covered that that door panel covers. So you instinctively, you know to stand behind the car door cover, that black large door cover that we took off. Stuff like down here, you can't get as much material down there, and you're not going to be standing there anyway, hopefully. You'll be standing over here where I'm standing right now. But just in case you want a piece down there, this piece, number 1, is going to fit right about here. This angle here is going to slip under the lip of the crash bar where it's angled, because it comes down at an angle there. This will go under the lip, and I'm going to tap it with a hammer over this direction. But before I do that, I'm going to place the number 2 panel in place to find out where this edge lines up with that crash bar, so I don't tap this thing too far to the left. Rather, I'm going to have just a perfect seam right there where the 2 match up, like that. So I'm going to put this in, put it where it's going to be, and then with my Sharpie, I'm going to mark on the crash bar where this lip is, and that's as far as I'm going to move this to the left. Now this piece is actually labeled number 2, a big 2 there, and is designated as 1MA. These designations tell us where each one of these jigsaw pieces go. 1 is the lower section, 2 is this lower section just below the midsection, that's 2. 3 is going to be kind of this middle area for overlaps. 4 will be on top. 5 is going to be this little space right here. So that's either going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, followed by the letter M or L or A. M is middle, R is right, L is left. And then there'll be a third digit, A, B, C, D. A is the outer skin of the door, B is the next level in, C is the next level in from there, D is going to be the farthest level from the skin, closest to the back skin of the door. So in this case, the number 2 piece that we're putting in, or the second piece we're putting in, it's going to be 1MA. 1 is the lowest section, M is middle, A is up against the skin. And again, I'm dropping this in first so I can get a bead on where this edge is going to be here, so I don't overplace this piece number 1 too far to the left. So just drop it in. When you saw that angle on there, that's going to match the angle of the under lip of that lower crash bar. So I'm going to drop it down like this and shift it all the way to the right. I'm going to try to get it up against this piece of the door here. There it fitted real snug. I could feel it when I moved it all the way to the right. I could feel it hit up against here on this piece. There's a piece right in there. I'll show a still shot on the side of the video here where the bolt for the hinge comes in. Got that all the way tight against that. So now I can look in here and see where that edge is, and I'm going to mark it with my Sharpie right where that lip is. Then I'll take it back out. So once I've marked that far edge of the number 2 panel on the crash bar, I can take it out. Then I'm going to remove that bag that I got down there to catch all my droppings. We'll use that later possibly. And now we'll start dropping pieces in there. This is piece number 1. It's got a flange here. The one flange will catch underneath the lip of the crash bar. The other one will fall down into this channel down here. Before you do that, remove this little black plug right here. Set that aside. We'll be putting it back in when we're done. And I can take that piece, drop it right in. Slide it all the way that direction, as far as I can go, just by pushing it. Then I'm going to take my hammer and gently tap it all the way to the back of the door. Take advantage of your flashlight. You're going to actually want to go past that mark that you made with this lip right here. So we got some room to maneuver this as we're tucking it into place. So I can pop it all the way back to here, and I'll see it showing up right down here, and I can move it back later with a long neck screwdriver. Now it may want to cant on you a little bit, and we'll try to get stuck. So I'm going to just reach in with my long neck screwdriver. Into place, tap it back a little bit more. I'm a good 2 inches beyond that mark that I made, and I can see the corner of it right down there. Now I can drop in the second piece, and then I'll move the first piece back into place when I'm all done. So now that I've got that number 1 piece all the way down, all the way back as far as I can get it, got enough maneuvering room for the second piece, I'm going to drop it in. This is number 2, this is the second piece we're going to install. It's designated as 1MA. 1 is the bottom area. This is number 2 area, number 3 area, 4, 5. So 1, down here, M means middle, A means skin. A, B, C, D. D is the back skin, A is the front skin of the car door. One thing you may want to do before you drop it in is glove up, make sure you got gloves on, take that foam or that construction adhesive and put some on the back of the skin here and even in the channel where the crash bar is. Once we get it in there, we can put some on the back of this and put it in place, and then that foam will expand out. It'll make contact, it'll keep contact with the skin and make contact with this piece and fill any of the voids that might be present. This will hold us in place and it will mitigate any rattles we may have in the future. When we drop this in, and once I get it down here, I'm going to kind of bring it up like this, bring it up into the channel of the lower crash bar. Before you even drop that in, make sure that all that caulking that was put in there at the factory is clean and clear. If you even have a little bump there, this thing's not going to set all the way up underneath that flange. So run your fingers up and down there, make sure that's clear. You have to go in with your screwdriver or putty knife and clear it out again. But I'm going to drop this down now. I checked my channel, it is clear. Now that's in place, I can actually put some more foam back there behind the paneling I just dropped down there and then maneuver it into place. So there, I'm holding it in place. I felt it make contact against the skin and against the under portion of that crash bar. But I'm holding it in place because it's kind of hanging in midair and the foam isn't sticky enough and set enough to hold it in place. So I'm holding it with my hand. Now I'm going to take advantage of my duct tape. I'm going to put a piece here. And then a second piece in the front area. And make it long enough so you can actually press it against the paneling and then come down on the skin door. So it's actually taped on the door, then on the paneling, then on the crash bar. And I can rip off the excess right there on the top. Same with this, I'll rip off the excess. And I can feel that it's down on the skin down here. This is where the paneling starts, so it's on the paneling, then against the crash bar. That'll hold it in place because when you start dropping other paneling in there, you're going to be moving things around and you don't want that to drop. You want that tight up against the under part of the lip to remove any gaps, to fill any gaps that a bullet could come through. Now that I have that in place, I can move this first piece forward, just with my hammer and my long neck screwdriver. There's the lip right there. Just tapping it forward, nice and easy. And I'm seeing it's coming up real nice and tight against the end of the number 2 piece. It wants to cant a little bit, so you may have to play with it. got nice and tight, a nice tight seam, and it'll be hard for a projectile to sneak through there, especially since I'm going to have even a couple more layers in front of that. So I can replace this little plug now. Looks like everything is in place where it needs to be. Now I can drop in the number 3 panel. So now we're going to drop in the number 3 panel. That's what it looks like, a big number 3 on it. It's designated as 1MB. 1 is the bottom, M is middle, B is second from the skin. Remember the skin is A, then it goes B, C, D. E is the back skin of the car door. And it's got this funny little curve on that. That's going to fit right in like that. That's what that's for. Kind of make its way this direction towards the front of the door. And I may have to pull the grommet hose out that holds the wiring harness so I can get that out of the way. I'll pop that back in later. There, she slid down there. She's still a little high on this end. I'm just going to take the hammer and tap it down. Make sure you're not putting your tools up against the skin of the door, because if you start tapping with that, you might dent it. You may also want to drill just a small little hole at this very top, so you can put your screwdriver in there and assist in getting that going down. Doesn't matter because this lips over, and all the material coming up to and covering the crash bar is all we need. If there's a little extending over, which happens here, that's no big deal. This will also help me get it going this way. A little hole there. Try to get it behind the hinge bolt. You'll see it, if you look in here, you'll see the bolt popping through. I'll take a picture of that. Get it behind and as far to the front of the door, hopefully up against the flange of the door here. I should have about ½ inch to 1 inch overlaying the crash bar. Again, you see the little tapping we have to do. That's why we tape that number 2 piece into place so it's not dropping down when we're tapping things around. This will hold it in place. And you can also pull it out with your fingers, throw some foam down there and down there, and you're good to go. Again, what we're trying to do is provide maximum coverage, and the rule of thumb is anywhere that door panel covers, we'll have ballistic material providing protection. So now we can move on to number 4, fourth paneling. We'll have number 4 in the middle. This is designated 1MC, 1 M middle, C is 3 from the skin, or 1/3 from the skin. We've got that same little curvature there. This will go right over the last one that we dropped in. I'm going to tap that down a little bit. Tap this one down a little bit. I can see that this one is lining up with the angle of the first one now. And it's sliding down to about this depth right here. So I've got 2 pieces of paneling covering this bottom part here. That should stop most handguns, especially the 9mm, 45 ACP, and the 44 Magnum in that range. It'll slow everything else down that's more powerful than that. But again, we're trying to get this area right here. This is all extra. And I drilled just a small little hole right there again. That way I can tap it all the way to the front of the door. Okay, I look in here and I can see that it's butting up against here and it's straddling that bolt, that hinge bolt. So that's in a good place. Now, if you got any question as how far this thing went down, you go to the front of the door, and you got those holes that receive the plastic receiver plug that holds the molding on, and you can look into those holes and see if you have any material. Which I do all the way across. So that means it's set down all the way just like I wanted it to. Now we can drop in the fifth panel. You may want to spread the last two apart here, just put a little foam in there again. Don't have to. These are going to be in tight, very tight. That's what this looks like. There's your curvature for the curvature. This is designated 1MD, 1 middle, 4 from the skin. Now it's not going to drop all the way down to the bottom. It might drop down to about here. Because we're running out of space, there isn't enough space between the two skins, the front skin and the back skin, down in this area. But we got as much as we could. And again, I'm going to use my tools to tap it down. See that the tops of these three panels are all parallel now. And again, I've got a little hole that I drilled in there. That's what you want to do. So you can put your screwdriver in there and pop it all the way to the front of the car door. See, they're all three lips. You can add foam between them if you can get it in there now. It's so tight, but I can kind of pry it out a little bit with a screwdriver, throw some foam in there. That'll glue everything together. I can look inside now and I can see that these panels are as far to the front of the car door as possible, because this is the area we're concerned about the most, because that's where you're going to be standing in a gunfight. Right here, behind your door, your duck and cover, not out here, right here. So we're trying to ensure that all the panels are slid as far to the front of the door as possible. So now we're going to drop in number 6. This is designated as 2RA. 2 is right below the upper crash bar. R is all the way to the right. A is skin. Again, hit it with some foam. I would hit it up here so it seeps down a little bit, and behind the lip of the lower crash bar. And you can drop this in. Bring it all the way to the back. Line it up and slide it all the way to the right. And use your flashlight to see if you're up against the front of the car, which I am. I'm up against the front of the car. So that's in place. That's how easy that is. When that foam expands, it'll make contact and it'll glue it into place. We're going to have a few more layers here, which will also hold everything in place. Then we can go to part number 7. That's designated 2LA. 2, remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 left. A is skin. I can throw some foam behind that piece I just put in there. Throw a little on the door skin. And I'm going to drop this one in like this. I'm going to pull it all the way forward. Then I'm going to take a piece of duct tape and I'm going to throw it right across this seam here to hold everything in place. So it's nice and tight and stays tight when I start banging around. That'll hold that in place until it gets more paneling in there and give it more time for that foam to expand and glue everything in place. Now we can drop in number 8 and number 9. Number 8 is designated 2RB. 2 right, B is second from the skin. And I can put foam in there if I want, either now or a little bit later. All the way to the back, and get it underneath the lips of the cross members of the crash bars, and slide it all the way, tap tap, all the way to the front of the car, and I can check, make sure it's up against this front piece of the car right here, and it is, so that's in place. Again, pop a little foam there, maybe on top or it'll seep down. Then I'm going to put in number 9, which is 2LB. 2 left, B is second from the skin. This was 2LA. This is 2LB. And there she slides up nice and tight. The first seam was right here. This seam is here, so they're offset. So I don't have seam on top of another seam. That would be easier to compromise with a projectile going through. Again, I'll put foam in where I think it needs to be. Then I'll start working my duct tape again. That'll hold that in place until I get other paneling in there and for the foam or glue to cure. It's not going to break that seam apart. Duct tape does an excellent job. Now we're going to drop some paneling in that'll cover the upper part of the door. First one I'm going to do here, number 10, is 4RA. 1, 2, 3, 4. R is right. A is against the skin. Remember your foam and or glue. This little lip here is going to catch right up like here because I have an inner brace at the top of the door. That's going to kind of flip around that. Another reason why we want to remove that window channel right here, because we're going to be bumping around. You may want to remove this grommet. It just pops out. Now you have access. We'll put that back later. So I'm going to drop this one in. And it's going to sit on the back of the flange of this top crash bar. You may want to pop some glue on the back of that panel before you drop it down. And you can reach through right here, now that we open that up. Put some foam against the skin, drop that thing in, all the way to the front of the car. Check it with your flashlight. Looks good. And we'll put in the piece over here. This is number 11. This cutout is because we got all kinds of door mechanism right here. This is one area of the car that we cannot fortify. There's just too much hardware in there. So we're maximizing coverage and This is something you have to live with. Another reason you're going to be standing here instead of here if you're ever caught in a armed conflict. So again, foam up here behind the flange of the crash bar. This is number 11, 4LA. 4 left, A is skin. Now I can see the seam between these last two have popped in. Right about here, I'll put any extra foam or glue I want. Hit it again with some duct tape. Looks good. It's nice and tight, very fine seam. And now I can move to number 12. Kind of look like the last ones, but they're a little bit longer or shorter, so we offset those seams. This one's designated 4RB. 4 right, B is second from the skin. Put my glue in there, foam, rub it down behind the back of the lip, all the way to the front of the door. Double check with my flashlight. You have to tap it a little bit. There, she tapped right into place. There's some inner geography in here that sometimes it'll butt up against that, and I got to kind of push it back and then move it forward. Here's number 13, 4LB. 4 left, B is second from the skin. Foam and or glue. There, got a nice tight seam. It's going to come off the back of this a little bit, so coverage is going to probably stop right about here. But again, you're not going to be standing here. You're going to be standing here. So everything's going to go to the front of the door to maximize coverage and complete coverage as best we can in this area. Actually about right here. Take advantage of some duct tape, put it over that seam. Again, that duct tape will hold that in position until we're done. Make sure those seams are nice and tight. Sometimes these things like to move a little bit. Especially because all this door handle, door lock hardware likes to jam things up a little bit. Now we're going to drop in some of the bigger pieces. And they're going to kind of cover this whole section here down to the number 1 level area, right about in here. This is the next piece, number 14, 3RC. 3, R's all the way to the right, C is third from the skin. Another reason you want to be able to move that window up and down. At this point, sometimes it gets in the way. The bracket gets in the way. You want to move it up higher. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to actually move it, drop it down behind these 3 right here, and the crash bar flange, and then I'm going to slide it all the way to the front. I can see that it's tight against this right here. So that's all the farther it's going to go to that direction. If you want, you can put a little duct tape here, just kind of hold it in place, but we'll be pushing this up against all the other paneling here shortly. But do put some foam in there. And drop some on here, here, along the edge, and get down on top here, behind, give it a good volume, give it a good squirt. I can feel that, that'll reach. Fill that up. drop in the next piece, which will go like this. This again goes around the door mechanism on the inside of the door. This is number 15, designated 3LC. 3 left C is third from the skin. They got just enough where it'll drop down, I can maneuver it, and then come towards the front of the car. Once that seam is lined up and tight, utilize that duct tape. Press them in tight together. Press against the duct tape so it's got a good hold. You can see it's nice and tight all the way down. You can see the seam barely through the duct tape. Again, add more foam if you want. Through there. So the next two pieces pretty much look like the last two pieces. Almost the same size, almost the same shape. This is number 16, designated 3RD. 3 R's to the right, D is 4 from the skin. And it's going to match up pretty much with the last one we put in there. And that's going to slide down behind those 3 panels that we got right here and right into the cross member, that crash bar. I'm going to sink it all the way down behind there. And then all the way forward. Check it with the flashlight. I see it's tight up against this right here. That's all the farther it can go. Can pop some foam in there. Well, before you slide it up, put some right on the last panel, slide it right over. And number 17, 3LD, 3 left, D is 4 from the skin. And that's going to marry up with this edge. Nice tight seam. Again, throw some glue in there with some foam, especially along this bottom lip. Some duct tape. Along that seam. Hold everything in place. A nice tight seam. So we now have the majority of the large pieces secured inside the door. Now we'll be working with this little area up here. You don't have to put anything up there, but if I can get something up there, that's good, because if you ever use the door as a duck and cover against an active shooter, you're going to be shooting here or here. So as much coverage as we can get is a good thing. And that will be these two pieces right here. Pieces number 18 and 19. First thing you want to do, obviously you have the side view mirror out, but you want to get this little plug out of there, a little plastic plug. Because it's going to be fitting up here and that plug interferes with that. The first thing we want to do, however, put a little hole right about there. And on the other one as well, because we're going to be using it. This is a hard fit. It's very difficult, but I've been able to get them in. I'm going to slide it in as such. That's why we took this grommet out. We got access here and through here. I'm going to slide it up here, and then we're going to tap it up on the back side, up like that. Another reason why we remove the window tracking that's right here. So the best way to do that is bring it in and pull it towards you so it's up against the back skin. If not, you're going to be fighting it the whole time. There I can see the tip of it right there, that crown. And I got it behind the window tracking that's right here, right there. So it's kind of like that, this direction up. I'm going to have to rock it back and forth to get it where I need it to go. There, she's sliding right up in there nicely now. High up as I can get it. And we're going to be drilling this out later because we have to have the side view mirror poke through. These are the bolt holes, 10mm bolts. And then the wiring, obviously, we'll plug in like that. And we'll return that little clip there to hold the wiring harness in place. And we'll try the second piece, just so we have two pieces in there. And we've found that with the skins, both the front and the back, with 2 layers of the BallistiShield, it'll stop a 9mm, a 45 ACP, and anything close to a 44 Magnum. Now I was able to get the crown of this, or the tip of this, just barely visible, and I kind of popped it that way to get that cant undone so it's straight up and down. And then it came underneath with my tools. I've got a couple layers of BallistiShield here, so I'm not going to be harming the outer skin of the door, so I can just put it right in there and do some tapping. Like that, and I can see the hole that I drilled there and there. So now I have access to it. And I can tap it in the rest of the way. Now we're going to be drilling this out. You probably hit 4 holes right here and then kind of auger it with your 3/8 inch drill. Plus you're going to be opening up these holes again so we can put those 10mm bolts through there when we put the side view mirror back on. But that's in place. I've got good access to that window tracking that comes down about this far, so the window tracking that we took out earlier will pop right in and bolt right here with that 10mm bolt right there. Needless to say, this is probably the hardest 2 pieces you're going to put in. You got to do a lot of finagling, make sure it's straight up and down when you're putting it in, and towards you on the back skin, and just kind of try to do your best to tap it in place. But that's why you drill those first 2 holes, because once you can see those holes, you can get under there with your flathead screwdriver and your hammer and just tap it into place. So we've just increased just a couple square inches of area, but a bullet can find that very easily. So we've got a couple more pieces to put in. We put in a piece across here to cover the cross member crash bar, and then I'm going to put a piece over this large opening because there's nothing there. You saw that when you took the paneling off, they just had a piece of visqueen. don't have to. We got enough coverage and enough density of the material to stop anything on a 3A scale. That includes any handgun, including 9mm 45 ACP, the 50 caliber AE 44 mag, and it will stop most shotguns. I'm confident it will stop all buckshot. The only thing that will get through this would be the high velocity slugs, something over 1,600 feet per second. Your average slug is around 1,300 to 1,500, and we stopped all of those. So, but before I get that done, remember to put this little plug back up in here. That's what you're going to tape your wiring harness back onto, and make sure these are drilled out, and reinstall the side view mirror. But I want to drop the window in first because I want to see where this bracket that holds the window and slides up and down, where that slides, because we're running out of room here. And if I get this piece too far over to the front of the door, it's going to catch on the bolt and the plastic knob that's in this little paneling that goes up and down. So I'm going to see where the window goes, where it slides, and I'm going to cover from there and back. Then I'll put this extra piece on. Again, you don't have to put either of those pieces on. I would recommend it because it's just more protection. Now we're going to take just a few more steps to make sure this thing is done and done correctly. What I like to do is put a strip across this whole piece right here where that upper crash bar is. And that's why we made those 4 marks with a little box. Because now I can transfer those marks onto this last sheeting here, and that will tell me where the crash bar is, so I can actually put some metal screws in there or some wood screws, suck this all the way towards the front. So I'm going to move this window bracket up and out of the way. Take my Sharpie, my box back in there, line it up. And that's the edge, the top edge of that crash bar, that's the bottom edge. That's why it's important to make those marks at the beginning of the install with the little box here. It's the perfect size. So now we have an excellent transfer of the location of that crash bar that we want to take advantage of. So let's put the window back in. I'm going to first, remember that little tab we pulled out of there? I'm going to tape it back to the wiring harness. Pop that in. Make sure that's all drilled out so it can receive the side view mirror. And that'll plug into the electronic female end that's on the side view mirror. Then we'll restore the window tracking. That starts about right here, comes down. Remember, we got a 10mm bolt there. Best way to watch this, view this, is actually through here, but I got the window up high, so I'm going to be coming on this area here where I remove that grommet. Remember that grommet goes right there? We'll put that back when we're done. And through this radio speaker hole that's there. You may want to check, there's a little tab right there, make sure that is at least parallel or flush with these 2 pieces here. If not, you're going to be buttoned up against the male end here, and it's going to make life a lot harder. So I got mine bent down just flush or a little bit lower than these 2 edges. It should fit right in there, just like that, bolted into place. The thing I do is I put this flashlight right like that, and I can see exactly what I'm doing. There. Felt it snap right in. That's where the bolt's going to go. You just pull that right over. Finger and thumb, make it tight. socket, make it snug. Now I'm going to drop the window in. Make sure the edges of the window, front and back, are sliding into grommet inside the window tracking. I've got it right down there where I want it. Now we're going to shim this bolt out. Again, I mentioned earlier that these are probably 1-inch bolts that hold the window in. It actually only needs about a 1/2 inch, but the manufacturer is not going to have multiple bolts when one will do the job of all the functions that are on this door. So that's probably why they used a longer bolt. But we want to pull it out so the end of the bolt is not scraping up against this or hitting some of the BallistiShield panels that we put in. So we provided you with a 1/2 inch hex nut, perfect shim, perfect size. One thing I forgot to tell you is I put a little plastic bag down there. Everything's tight down there, so if you drop something, you should be able to get it. If you got a bag or some newspaper down there to begin with, it's even more secure. There we are. Now I can tell how close it is up against this BallistiShield. So when I put in that piece up here, see how it's hitting? I can drop it back about a 1/4 inch. And this thing will slide up and down a little bit at an angle. That's why there's an angle on here. And it shouldn't miss that. And again, you don't even have to put this in there. But it's just added protection, and we can do it. And we're going to be cinching all this up as I want to put some metal screws in here, tying it into the crash bar, just to pull everything together and have it as close to the skin as possible so all this gear doesn't catch up on the shielding material. This hole is lined up perfectly to get my socket in, and I'll drop the other bolt in here. There's 2 of these, one here, one here. Should be obvious when you're looking at the glass. And get that started and tighten down with my finger and thumb. Then I can reach in with the socket and finish the job. Just good and snug. That's all you need. Now it's a good time to actually put some power to the window motor. Run it all the way up, run it all the way down, see if it's catching up on anything. That's all the way up. That's all the way down. The window's going to be below the molding that we have here. So it's all the way down. It's run out of track. It's not catching up on anything. So I'm going to bring it up so I see the bracket, the window bracket, and the window bolts right about here, so I can figure out where I'm going to put that. Here we are. So I positioned the window so this bracket is quite visible, and I can see the edge of it, how it's going to track when it goes up and down. Just take my marker, that will let me know how far I want to bring this thing over. Again, I don't want to go up to the bolt. I can feel it hitting the bolt right there. That probably won't happen once you suck everything together with those sheet metal screws. Again, you don't have to put these 2 pieces in. We just found that we took a test door out to the range, we shot it. I put 24 rounds right along both crash bars, and one actually got through right about here. And so we took it apart and we found out, guess what? I didn't get all that foam padding insulation out from underneath the crash bar, so my piece didn't fit tight up against the under flange. And so there's a little hole there, a little gap there. And one round, I think probably a 45 or a 44 mag actually got through. So anyway, we have the ability to put something in there to cover that up, just in case you didn't get all that glue out of there and everything is not tight. It needs to be tightly fit. And then we're going to put a piece here, so we're going to double the density of material, stopping any munitions coming through. So what I'm going to do now is put these pieces in and actually bolt or screw right into the cross member crash bar. The means we do that is, well, let's first get these pieces in. This rectangular piece will go all the way to the back of the door, like that, and then hold it into place. Here's our duct tape again. It works great. Don't hit it hard yet. I just want it kind of in place. And I'm straddling that line. Remember, I made that with the box. And we took off the 2 marks that we made at the beginning of the installation. So I know that's the edge of the lip. So right here is the crash bar. Then I'm going to take the most important piece here. I'm going to match it to that angular line I just drew, straddling the 2 horizontals. You put some foam behind it before you tape it on there, but it's going to be held in place pretty tight by these screws, as you'll see here in a second. So now I'm going to take my drill. I've got a 1/8 inch drill bit on here, and I said earlier you could hit the lips or the flanges coming up. Probably a faster and easier way is just hit right dead center. The way you'll hit the center of that crash bar, and there's a good probably 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch between the edge of the crash bar and the outer skin. We don't want to penetrate the outer skin. It's not going to look nice. Remember, that's kind of foamed in place. You got about that much space between that face of the crash bar, the outer door skin. So you got some room. So what you're going to do is you're going to drill in until you feel resistance. That's the crash bar. Once you penetrate that, stop. You've gone deep enough. So I'm going to take my drill, I'm going to put in a 1/8 inch drill bit. I'm going to expose a little over 1.5 inches, between 1.5 inches and 1 5/8 inches. And then I'm going to drill, actually, instead of using the flanges like I recommended at the beginning of the install, I'm going to actually hit the middle of the crash bar. It's a little bit more tricky. You don't want to puncture the outer skin. You just want to puncture the metal of the crash bar. You'll feel it as you're putting the drill in. But that crash bar, if you remember, it's got that foam goo glob behind it. There is a good 3/8 of an inch gap between the crash bar and the outer skin. So when you first drill in, you're going to feel the resistance of the BallistiShield material. Then you're going to have a hard stop. That's your crash bar. Once you penetrate that, stop, or you're going to be putting a hole in your outer skin, which you don't want. And I'm going to hit it right in the middle, like I said. You see how I felt the resistance, and it just popped. So I know I made it through that crash bar. Now I can put a 1.5 inch sheet metal screw or wood screw into that hole I just drilled. See, it sucked the whole paneling back a little bit. If you want, you can remove the duct tape. And then run the window up and down, make sure nothing's catching on this, especially the head of the screw that you just put in there. If that's the case, you can countersink it a little bit. It's a countersink tool. Augers it out so that head will fit farther down into the material. We may not have to do that at all if it clears. So let's see if it clears. It does. Clears nicely. So what I can do now is I can take this piece that I got taped there, butt it up against, make a nice tight seam. And I can put a couple screws in there. Right there, I'm feeling the resistance. I went through a couple sheets of the BallistiShield paneling, and now I can feel the resistance of that crash bar, that steel. It'll pop through real nice. Now I can put another one right here. Again, drilled through. Now I'm feeling the resistance of the crash bar. There, popped right through. And I'll stick another one right about here. Couple of 1.5 inch sheet metal screws were tight. Just make sure, run the window up and down, make sure it clears all those screw heads. There it did. See, it's all the way down. Nice. I've got good flow of the window up and down. So, by the way, the number that I put on these two pieces is 20. Piece number 20. Now we're going to cover this area. Again, it doesn't have to be there, but we found by putting that on there, it just adds extra protection. We have stopped shotgun slugs, high velocity, 1560 feet per second slugs. Stopped it. The whole door did. The door started to fail at about 1610 feet per second slugs. It'll stop all buckshot. So you don't have to worry about that. But since we have opportunity to increase the density here, let's take advantage of it. So the piece that we're going to put in here, I just have as piece 21. I don't have a designation since it's obvious where it's going to go. Real easy way to put this in. Take your marker, make an even mark distance here, from here to here, here to here. Same here. And then take piece number 21 and straddle it between the marks you just made. Make sure there's no openings there. And take your drill and drill your hole there. Bring that back off. See where that hole is. You want to make sure it's at least 1/8 to 1/4 inch here, because this is going to be going on the inside and coming up against this way against the outer skin. And take a small sheet metal screw or wood screw and screw it down tight. And take your marker just draw around that. Now you can see if that's the exposure you want. That looks really good. I got even coverage around everything. So when I put it on the inside and pull it back out, the edge of that's going to be that far in. That's what I want. So I'm going to drill that back into place. And that's where my bottom screw is going to go. But I'm not going to screw it in right now. What I'm going to do is take it off. And now, I'll get rid of this. I'm actually going to put a little screw right here so I've got something to hold on to. Don't worry, that's only an 1/8 inch hole. No bullet's going to go through that. I got something I can hold on to. Put that on the inside. Now it's screwed in. It'll stay there for now. But I've got that hole lined up, and I got this one to work with down here. I also recommend before you tighten this all down, put a bead of foam around there on the inside. So that'll help glue that into place, reduce any rattles. Then I can pull this out. I was able to line that up. I got a little bit of tension, which is what I need, because now I'm going to go in and complete that. Another good thing to use, possibly even better, would be rivets. If you want to use aluminum or steel 1/8 inch rivets, once you have these holes drilled, they'll hold that in place. So look at this big area that we just increased the density to. That's more stopping power right there. Again, you're going to be standing about right here, but you may have part of your torso or bottom side like this, and we want as much coverage as we can get. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this. combination of the screws or rivets that are holding this in place and the foam, that's not going anywhere. So now if ammunition comes through the skin, it's going to hit this and the energy is going to push it this way, but we got it lift off because we have it on the inside of the door up against this lip here. Whereas if we had it on the outside, it could possibly compromise these screws if it was big enough ammunition. But this way, it's got to bust this whole piece through this back skin. That's highly unlikely. So now you have a solid door. We reinforce the areas where this crash bar is, at least up to here. We've tested this out in the range. Like I said, it stops every handgun we could throw at it. That was a 9mm, 45 ACP, 44 Magnum, and it'll stop a 50 AE. We know that because it would stop a shotgun slug high velocity up to 15-10 feet per second, which is much more powerful and devastating than a 50 AE. And that's all at 3 yards, so at point blank range. The idea is you pull up on somebody and they walk out of their car or out of their front door and they got a shotgun or a handgun and they come up to the front of your car. That's about 3 yards between the front of your car and where you're standing if you're using this as a duck and cover protection shield. Sometimes you have no choice. It's a matter of time, sometimes at times down to seconds. And this is going to keep you safe for that time of seconds. And so we tested at 3 yards, 10 yards, and closer. I tested it at 6 inches. So now we're ready to put the paneling back on, or you can put the molding on the front. Now on the front, remember you got those holes. Now we can reinstall everything. Door panel itself, hooking it up, make sure that the cables and the wiring harness and the speaker are all in place. Then we're going to have to come to putting the molding back in place on the front of the door. Everywhere you see one of these receiver retrainer plastic plugs, there'll be a hole in the front skin of the car door. I used a drill bit, that's a 3/8 inch drill bit, to hollow out those holes because we have a material all the way across there blocking those holes. So I'm opening the holes up again, and then I'll use my foam or an industrial adhesive, pop a little in the hole, then I'll slap this on once I get these receiver plugs lined up, and that glue will hold these receiver plugs in place, which is holding your molding in place. So that's all it takes. But you got to clear out those holes and put something in there. Obviously, these are not going to fit in there. Now you have a duck and cover that'll protect you from any handgun and the 12 gauge shotgun up to some of the high velocity slugs. And like I said, we've tested it up and we're able to stop the 1560 feet per second. A couple of the 1610 penetrated right around here. We put about 6 rounds of the 1610 in, it stopped 3 of them. So that's the limitation right there. But it's rated for a 3/8, which is most handguns and 12 gauge shotgun up to 1350 feet per second. Again, this is not designed to stop a long rifle like an AR-15 or an AK-47, 30-06. Those are penetrating munitions. In order to equip a door for something like that, you're talking high armor, you're talking ceramics, you're talking heavy weight and a lot of money. This is the poor man's ballistic duck and cover for all our law enforcement brothers and sisters that are out there and need something that they can afford, that's going to keep them as safe as possible. This will do the job. So we're about done. The only thing left to do is put on the side view mirror and the door molding on the front. You use your drill again and the 3/8 inch drill bit. I drilled from the backside forward because it has the perfect cutout. That piece that is required to be open here so that you can get the wiring harness through to the side view mirror. Plus you're going to have a bolt here and a head bolt here to bolt the side view mirror back into place. Those are 10mm socket bolts. The 3/8 inch is also perfect for re-drilling these holes because we have BallistiShield paneling up against the door now. You can see it right here, here. That stuff's in the way, but we needed this paneling out so we could drop the paneling all the way down, but we needed the door molding off and these release retainer plugs out so we could drop the paneling all the way down as far as it would go. But then again, it's going to plug these holes. So with the 3/8 inch drill, you just drill them out. Then you use some industrial adhesive like Loctite or liquid nail or something to that effect, or the foam works really good. Give it a squirt. You have your door molding all put back together with all the retainer plugs, release plugs in place. Put it in place and just pop it in. That glue will set. Those retainer and release plugs are not going to move. Your door molding is going to be on there tight and it's going to stay there. Now you have a duck and cover system for your police vehicle. So in case you find yourself in a jam, you got some protection. Much more than if your door had nothing. This regular door, just a regular door, will not stop anything greater than a .22 long rifle. The 9mm will go right through it and it'll go through your other door as well. So a 9mm or greater is going to go right through the entire car. So will a shotgun. The only thing I've seen the car door stop was probably about a .22 short. 22 long will go through it. And you're standing right back there, it's going to go into you. So this system will stop, again, a 9mm, 44 mag, 45 ACP, 12 gauge shotgun, including buckshot and most slugs. And the system is affordable. It's easy to install once you know what you're doing, and it'll last forever.